Well, ladies and gentlemen, what an honour and a pleasure to be addressing the party congress of what is without any doubt the most promising, the most exciting, the most hopeful and the most dynamic political party in Europe today. And I understand enough Dutch to tell you that it also has the best jokes. My warmest congratulations to you all. My warmest congratulations to your leader, Thierry Baudet. It's not just an honour to be here, it's also a pleasure. It's an intense pleasure to be back in this city of Amsterdam, whose canals and whose museums express all that is most perfect about European civilization. And I'm sure that if you in this hall have got involved in politics, it is surely to defend this inestimable inheritance that we as Europeans all enjoy and which we are privileged to have. Now, you've embarked on a journey which I'm convinced will take you a long way. You have won a magnificent victory in the parliamentary elections. I'm confident you'll win a wonderful victory in the municipal elections and indeed in the European elections next year. And you did, above all, I think, not more, but as well, you did an inestimable service to European democracy by initiating and winning the campaign on the Ukraine Association Agreement last year. And that, your victory then deserves to be ranked alongside the Brexit referendum and the election of Trump as one of the three most important events of 2016. However, your victory was stolen. It was stolen from you. It was stolen by the political elite, just as it was stolen from the Danes in 1992, from the Irish in 2001, from the French and the Dutch in 2005, and from the Irish again in 2009. On all these dates, referendums have been overturned, treaties have been ratified either by national parliaments or by making voters vote a second time until they get the answer right. Even now, people are determined to make the British Parliament reverse the result of the Brexit referendum, and of course people are desperate to indict or impeach Trump in America. Now, these repeated violations of the purest expression of democracy, which is a referendum, they are all consequences of what Thierry Baudet rightly calls the cartel of parties. It's obviously not just in the Netherlands that is governed by a cartel of parties. All across Europe, we are governed by what I have called a single political class. A single political class. It appears to be divided between nations, and it appears to be divided between left and right. But in reality, it is transnational, and it crosses the so-called, in fact, totally artificial left-right boundary. And like a business cartel, this political cartel serves its own interests and not those of its voters. Its members have far more in common with each other than they do with their electorates. In Germany, as you know, it doesn't make any difference whether you vote Christian Democrat or Social Democrat. Chancellor Merkel has been in power for 12 years. For 8 of those 12 years, she's governed in grand coalition with the Social Democrats, and it appears that she's now about to do so again. In France, where I live, the election of a former socialist minister as President of the Republic has led to the creation of a government whose Prime Minister, who is headed, with a government which is headed by a politician from the supposedly conservative Les Républicains. In Europe, you can vote for whatever colour you like, so long as it's grey. Now, this argument about cartels applies at the national level, and of course it applies at the European level. The European Union is a cartel of governments. Just as the parties form a cartel, so governments form a cartel at the European level. Because by sitting in the Council of Ministers, governments become legislators. They transform themselves into lawmakers. And that is why it is no understatement to say that the European Union is a permanent coup d'etat. It is a permanent coup d'etat because popular sovereignty is systematically stolen from the people. And as we know, every time a criticism is made of the European Union, the old argument about peace is trotted out, as if the only thing that lay between war and peace in Europe were European Commission directives about sausages. This is a deeply reactionary sentiment, and it is worthy of Madame de Pompadour's famous remark, "Après nous, le déluge." Now, because of this situation, it's hardly surprising that protest parties have had success across Europe. But I'm firmly of the view that the Brexit result and the election of Trump cannot be understood purely as expressions of populism. On the contrary, let's not forget that the Brexit referendum was campaigned for by no fewer than 6 serving cabinet ministers. And many of the most prominent figures in the Brexit campaign had been to the best schools in England and were graduates of the best universities in England. And similarly, in America, Trump may have come from nowhere, but the fact is that at the time of his election, he was the candidate of the Republican Party, of the oldest pillar in the American political establishment. And that, I make this point to show that what we need in Europe is not denunciation of old elites, but new elites. That's what we need in Europe today, and that's why the Forum of Democracy is so important. It's essential that politics be based not only on well-founded criticism, not only on the attack, but also that it have a project which draws people towards it, a genuine project for real change which is brought about by being a model that other people want to follow. The key to this change lies in the nation. The nation-state is one of the greatest creations of European civilization. It is comparable in grandeur to the beauty of the great cathedrals which we admire all over Europe. And I make this point to say something very important. The Netherlands has a very crucial role to play in forming a model for the whole of Europe. The Dutch are a proud nation. It's precisely because the Netherlands has such a long history of independent nationhood that it has been able to become, over the centuries, a model of liberalism and the rule of law, which the entire world admires. The European Union claims, it's true, you mustn't underestimate yourselves. The European Union claims that nationhood has to be overcome to achieve peace, but the Dutch model shows, as does the French and the British and others, that the nation-state is the indispensable framework for civil liberties and the rule of law. It's precisely countries who have failed to achieve a stable national identity and who have destroyed Europe by the grossly excessive way that they have pursued it. It's precisely those nations who have the weakest traditions of liberalism. And it's there that the rule of law is most severely corrupted, just as it is in the European Union. You here in this country, you embody that ideal, and it is an ideal. It's an ideal worth dying for, of a nation at peace with itself and at peace with its neighbours. And it's an ideal and a model which the whole of Europe should imitate. And the idea that seafaring people like the Dutch need European Union directives or the European single market to trade is ridiculed by every single townhouse in this city. So I feel that we stand for the real Europe. We stand for the real Europe, not for the false Europe of Brussels, which is a sort of like a grotesque cuckoo that has pushed the real Europe out of the nest. We stand for the real Europe of living nations, not the false Europe of bureaucrats and the deadly boredom of their directives. We stand for the real Europe of towns and cities, bridges and churches, fields and mountains, not the false and invented bridges and windows. which they painted on the euro banknotes, but which, as you know, do not exist in reality. We stand for a Europe whose history stretches back 2,500 years, and which includes Athens and Jerusalem and Rome as part of its legacy. We reject the false Europe, which claims that history began in 1957 and that before that there was nothing but war, and which seeks to impose the post-national trauma of Germany as an obligatory model for everybody else. And you, the Dutch, the Netherlands, embodies this real Europe. The beauty of your cities, not just Amsterdam, but the other cities, is one of the key components of European civilization. The delicate glories of your painting, which is both intensely Dutch and also intensely universal. Your painting embodies the gentle greatness of which all Europeans should be proud. We all know the softly lit interiors of Vermeer and Pieter de Hooch. They express the supreme and sublime duality of European life, quiet and dignified at home, but with a window open onto the outside world. What a contrast between that ideal and the hideous buildings which disfigure Brussels and Strasbourg to house the European institutions. Structures which are made of glass and steel, but which you can't see out of, and which will probably fall down in a few years. The aesthetic vandalism of these buildings is only part of that greater political vandalism which these institutions wreak upon the delicate ecosystem which is the nation-state, and which all civilized Europeans must strive to preserve and nourish. For all that you have done so far, and for all you will do in the months and years to come, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.